Welcome to our new show called the Relationship Toolbox. This will be a show about building relationships and maintaining positive relationships, whether they be with a spouse, a committed partner, perhaps a co-parent, a child, or a good friend, or even a colleague at work. My name is Tom Chamberlain, and I am a counselor and a mediator. In working with couples and with families, I have found two things that seem to occur very frequently. One is that when folks get into a problem in their relationship, they tend not to have the skills that they need to work through whatever conflict they're having. And secondly, by the time they come to us for a third party to intervene, their emotions are running so high with anger, frustration, resentment, that it's very difficult to, at that point, teach new skills for communication to help them get through the issues that they're dealing with. So the purpose for this show then became an idea, as we talked about, why do we wait for people to get into a serious conflict or problem in their relationship before we start sharing the skills that we need or they may need to work through this? So thus came this show. Where we hope to present you with many different skills for working on your relationship. Throughout our series of shows that we will be doing, we will be referencing the work of John Gottman and Dana Casperson. For those of you who are interested in reading about this topic, you may find their work in the local bookstore. Most of us carry or have around the house a toolbox, some type of box to put in the utensils that we need to do different tasks around the house. If we're a sewer, we might have our sewing equipment there. An artist, we'd have our brushes and so forth. Or if we'd like to make repairs, we're going to have our tools in our toolbox. We've borrowed from that idea to indicate that when we work on relationships, we also need a toolbox to pull out relationship skills that we have for continuing our relationships in a healthy style. With me today, I have two other professional mediators who are also very passionate about this topic. So Marsha, would you share with our audience what brings you here and why you're so passionate about this?
Sure, thank you, Tom. I'm Marsha Castle, and I am a trained mediator. I'm also an educator and a co-parent, a divorced co-parent who hopefully mindfully works on that co-parenting with my former partner. I'm also a product of a pretty high conflict home, and I think that's what influenced me to look into this kind of work. I was drawn to know more about it. I kind of felt like if you could just figure out how to have the fortitude not to enter into conflict, then everything would be okay, and you could be a model for that. And I quickly realized that that wasn't possible and that conflict was inevitable, and it was more about moving through it. And I'm really excited to do this work, both with our clients, with my students, with friends, with the folks in the family court that we meet with that are doing separation when they have children. So it's really exciting work. What about you, Tracy?
Hi, so my name is Tracy Sheridan, and I too am a mediator like Tom and Marsha. And I was drawn to this work originally. I went through a divorce as well and needed to figure out how to co-parent, and it could have gone better. And I think that if I had some of these skills that we're going to review with you, it would have been an easier process. And so now, as a mediator and having this work behind me, I feel like I am better equipped to go into and deal with my current relationships, and it's just really helpful. And as Marsha said, when she was growing up in a conflictual household, my family did not have a lot of conflict on the outside, but certainly conflict existed. And our way of dealing with things was much more keeping it under wraps and kind of pretending it didn't exist. And I just always knew that felt wrong. I just didn't know what to do about it. So coming here today and having this opportunity to share some of these things and teach people about some skills, and like Tom said, before things get rough, is really beneficial to people. So hopefully that's where things will head for this. And Tom, you're going to talk about where we're going to go from here?
Yes, let's talk about some typical assumptions that people have about relationships. Some of these assumptions actually may make it more difficult to practice some of these skills, so we thought we would talk about them here to begin with. Let's start with the first one, Tracy, and see what you can do with that one, please.
Okay, great. So the first assumption we have is that you shouldn't have to work at a relationship. This is probably a pretty common assumption that if you're in love and if things are going well in your personal relationship or in your marriage, that is supposed to be easy and effortless. Even at work or with your children or with your friends, people tend to think that it should just be easy and effortless to have communication, good communication. So again, that is an assumption. What really happens is that even though as human beings we're designed to be social, we don't really come out and be born. We're not born with the skills that we need to move forward and communicate effectively with each other. If we're fortunate in our lives to have good role models, and we might have parents or colleagues as we get older, or good friends, or I know sometimes people refer to their friends' parents as good role models. Things like that as we're growing up, that's great, that's ideal. And as we get older, we can find new role models for ourselves, and that is even better. But sometimes we don't have those role models in our lives, and we kind of are flying by the seat of our pants and figuring it out as we go along. So our hope is to bring some of these skills to you so that you can make things a little bit easier in your lives. And science has shown that we're actually fairly poor judges of our own skills. So when we look at our own skills, we are not going to be the best person to really know if we're doing a good job or not. And the person receiving our skills is the person who should really be making that judgment for us. The other thing we do is we tend to get locked into communication styles. So we talk about things in such a fashion that we don't know what else to do, and we have, I call it a go-to place. We have a natural go-to place that we head, and then when we go there, we realize it's not effective. So one of the goals today is to have that, even if you go to that place, recognize it, and maybe you can stop it and take one of the skills that we're teaching you today and go there instead and see how that works for you. And Marsha, I believe you were going to go with the second assumption?
So another assumption would be that conflict in a relationship is automatically bad and should be avoided. This was an assumption, as I said, that I had coming into this work. Because I came from a home where that was the case. But conflict is a natural result of people living and working together. It's inevitable. You can't avoid it. You're going to have conflict with people that you don't like necessarily, but you're going to have conflict with people that you do like, people that you love. You're going to have misunderstandings. There are times when you're not going to be as clear as you thought you were. There are times when you're going to make assumptions because you don't have enough information, and that's just what we do, and you'll act on those assumptions. There may be times when you think that your goals are incompatible with somebody else's goals and that you need to skirmish over that, or that your access to resources is going to be compromised by somebody else's needs. So it happens unless you just choose to remove yourself from living and working with people. And oftentimes we feel like we have to avoid conflict, and you just kind of swallow it. And avoidance is one of the styles, and we may talk about that in another show. But then you're inauthentic. You're removing yourself, avoiding the tension perhaps, but then you've just taken it inside. It really is more about how you choose to move through conflict. And conflict can be productive. It can be productive in an intimate relationship. It can be productive in a business and in society. It can surface things that really need to be brought to light. Needs not met in a relationship, maybe a flawed system in a business, and certainly we've seen it in society when there are things like civil rights and the environment and things that just need to be discussed. And without somebody bringing it to the surface, it doesn't change. So conflict alone is not something to be avoided. It's more about moving through it. Also, that kind of moves into the third assumption, thinking that once conflict is there and it's negative, that it's all over and you can't retreat to a better place. But you can, with the right skills and with a deliberate, mindful mindset, re-engage in the positive ways that you once did, and also learn how to communicate with somebody to get needs met. And then, Tom, what about a fourth assumption?
Well, this last assumption that we're going to talk about is the assumption that relationships are just unpredictable. You either have the chemistry or you don't. It doesn't matter what you do. Well, the social scientists who have looked at this say not true. That most of the relationships and the problems that we have with them can be changed by the way in which we respond to each other. Now, certainly you can't control the other person, but you certainly can control your responses to what the other person is providing for you or delivering to you. So scientists have actually found that if they observe a couple working together for a while, they can actually predict with about 80% accuracy whether that relationship is going to be successful or is going to fail. That's pretty striking information we found in the research. So what are these scientists looking for in a relationship that signals to them, yes, this is going to work, or no, this is either going to fail or these people are going to be very unhappy? That's what this series of shows will be about. So let's now get started with our first skill that we're going to talk about, and that is having respect for someone's point of view. Tracy, why don't you take it away with that one?
Okay. So one of the thinking skills we wanted to talk about was point of view. And what happens when you're trying to tell someone your point of view, right? You get kind of set in your ways and you want to share your opinion so badly and you want them to know how you see something. One of the difficulties is that people tend to try and prove their point of view to the other person instead of sharing their point of view with the other person. And when you're doing that, you can think about it. Think about it for a second right now. You know what it feels like when someone is telling you, this is what the way things are. It's factual. It's not an opinion. This is just how you have to see it. It doesn't work very well. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is about how to share your point of view with somebody else with the understanding that they may not agree with it. It might just be something that you are saying. It is how you feel and that it is allowable and that it can be understood without being agreed with. And that goes both directions. So if you both, or more than one person, maybe I shouldn't just say both, if you all learn that skill, think about how much easier it would be and how much more comforting it would be to share your point of view with someone else. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit, and just the way you approach it is really one of the key factors, instead of kind of saying, you know, you're wrong, or you don't know what you're talking about, you know, things like that that might come out of your mouth when you're angry or frustrated. But if we can take a step back and take a minute to be thoughtful and mindful, and say, you know, I'd like to share something with you, it works significantly better. So, and Marsha, you were going to talk a little bit further about that.
It's a really good distinction to talk about sharing rather than telling, because the respecting point of view, excuse me, really gets rid of the I'm right and you're wrong, and that oppositional, where it's a win-lose situation, and it allows, by allowing the possibility of another point of view, you learn more information. So point of view is really a listening and thinking skill. It's a paradigm shift because you're opening your mind up to entertain the fact that maybe somebody can see something from a different perspective. And if you think about when you're actually standing in a different place, you might be seeing something different, and your truth is valid, and the other person's truth is valid based on their perspectives, their position, and in this case, life experiences and family of origin, or the things that have shaped us are going to help us interpret that. You have to be able to hold two things in your mind at the same time that might not be compatible, that might actually seem contradictory and incongruent, but it's a place to start from. By listening, it doesn't mean I agree with you. I'm endorsing what you're saying. It's just saying I'm listening to you. I'm hearing, I'm curious, I want to know more, and that's where you can start solving things instead of just kind of volleying back and forth. It would be a volley if it's nice conversation. It could be like throwing grenades at each other and catching them if it turns ugly. So it's kind of expanding perspective. We find, as you know, in mediation, we'll hear the 2 points of view, and then we may have yet another one. There may be multiple points of view to any predicament. So it's good for parties to be able to hear, to listen, and to hold those things at the same time. So I think we might have some time.
What, to demonstrate this?
To demonstrate that, yeah. You want to?
Let's do that. Let's. Maybe we can pretend Tracy can be my wife, and I'll play her husband. And Marsha, if you could kind of point out the things that are going wrong with it. So Tracy and I are going to start having a conversation, and I'm going to violate all this stuff in terms of her point of view, and watch what happens.
So, Tom, I was thinking that maybe I could go into our savings account a little bit and take some money out and maybe start looking for a new car for me.
Tracy, I don't want to get into our savings like that. You know, there's nothing wrong with your car.
There's plenty wrong with my car. You're not hearing me at all. There's a lot wrong with my car, and I would feel more comfortable having a new car. And you do this all the time. You think
Tracy,
that you can just say whatever you want, and I'm supposed to go along with it.
If you knew how to take care of your car, maybe there wouldn't be a problem.
That is so not true. So I'm just going to get stranded on the side of the road, and
Tracy,
that'll be
what
that.
do you even know about a car? You don't even know a fan belt from a seat belt.
I know plenty about cars.
This is not productive. We've come to kind of lobbing grenades back and forth, some name calling.
Trying to prove who's right.
Yeah, discounting, positional statements. I need a new car, you can't have a new car. Back and forth, it's going to happen, it won't happen. And there hasn't been any new information learned here, so let's try it again with some allowing for a point of view and maybe
respecting it.
Yeah, listening a little better. Okay.
Whether I agree with it or not.
Whether you want to buy a new car or not.
Right. Okay, so we're going to start it again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, Tom, I was just wondering if you had a few minutes to talk.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about my car. I know we've talked about it before.
Oh, yeah.
And I know it's come up, but I'm really starting to feel very nervous in it, and I am thinking if we could maybe go into our savings a little bit and get some money out of there and start looking for a new car for me, that would be great.
So are you having more difficulty with it then? I mean, is it really giving you some anxiety about this?
It is. I was driving it the other day and it started making these weird noises, and I'm not sure what that noise is. And maybe it's fixable, but it just keeps happening every time we fix something, something else goes wrong, and that is making me uncomfortable, and it's making me scared. I'm afraid to drive it.
So it sounds like when you think about the anxiety and the fear that you go through when you're driving that car, it just isn't worth it, and you would rather go into our savings, even though we want to build that up a little bit. But for you, it would be better if we use some of that money to purchase another car, and then you wouldn't be faced with this all the time.
Yeah, it would give me much more peace of mind to be driving a safe car than to have the money in the bank. And the money in the bank's important to me. I know, don't get me wrong, it is important. But that feeling of safety and security is more, and peace of mind is more important to me.
Okay, I hear that from you, yes.
Okay.
All right. So I think this went better. I don't know that Tom agreed, but he listened.
Well, I think I'm getting a new car.
Well, yeah. Maybe
that's what I heard.
Maybe you're getting his car, because maybe his threshold for safety is different than yours. But at least he understands that, and there's an opportunity to brainstorm. You may still have an obvious solution, but there may be another solution that meets both of your needs. Tom's need not to spend money, and your need to feel safe. Maybe you swap cars, but you wouldn't have learned that if you just started it. Then there may be a third or fourth, or you could brainstorm about solutions because you're listening to each other. You know, we have actors here and we're doing this, and of course it's going to work the second time, but I really find that it does. When I feel heard, or with somebody that I'm having a dispute with feels heard, then the conversation softens.
It even felt that way in a role play.
It does feel
I mean,
that
here
way in
we
a
are
role
just
play.
playing it out,
Yes.
but
You can
in the
literally
first
feel
way,
it.
I could feel,
Yes.
you know, it building up,
Yeah.
and then as we changed that, I could feel just a relaxing with it, and I wasn't even thinking about, are we going to do this or not do this? It was just listening.
Right. Because when you're heard, you don't have to escalate anymore. You don't have to find a louder voice or better words or emotions, or you don't have to ratchet it up because you're being heard. And you gave Tracy some evidence that you were hearing her, not just, yeah, I know, I hear you.
Right.
He repeated back, and I think we're going to get into some of those other skills in maybe another episode. But I find, you know, this is not just kind of a cliche that we're manipulating for the purposes of our conversation. I find that I am willing to listen to someone else when they've listened to me and I feel heard and understood. And it's my experience that when somebody is given the gift of being heard and understood, they're willing to listen to me too.
And we are literally better at making decisions and opening up your mind to options. You know, it's a chemical thing.
Yeah.
It's
Your adrenaline isn't going
yeah,
there.
and everything opens up, and you are better at making decisions when you're
Plus it gets
having those
at
conversations.
one of the assumptions too, and the assumption is if I listen to you, I'm giving into it already, I'm weakening my position, I've got to show strength and resist it right from the get-go.
And yeah, even in the role play, that's actually what I find is you're empowering yourself by telling me what you think, and I felt empowered as well. And it was not a weakness at all. I actually felt better that you were sharing your point of view with me.
But
And the
people are
first-
afraid to listen. I'm sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
Because, you know, in society these days, if you give too much time to somebody, you're endorsing their position. And a lot of times we just listen enough to rebut, to get that yes but. We're listening enough to recreate our response and not really listening for understanding. I'm sorry, what were you
That's
going
okay.
to say?
The other thing too that happens, and I was trying to demonstrate it here, was not only was I not listening to Tracy initially, but I actually was attacking her. And I was attacking her as a person, not even her point of view, which is kind of dirty fighting with that, because then it just leads the other person to either want to retreat, or I should say to ratchet it up and come back with even more aggression.
And to just be in your own camps, in your own tribes. But we could use this with an intimate partner. You could use it with your neighbor when you're, you know, putting up a fence or siting your solar panels, or the dog, or you know,
Or with your own child.
or with your teenagers about
Yes.
what their behavior is going to be like. So
We've pointed out that these are all learned skills. So I guess another point that we should make is that your children are watching how you, as a parent, are modeling conflict resolution skills, and how are you modeling the way that you regulate your emotions and use your emotions and turn that into behavior that's constructive. So there's another reason besides just being easier to relate, that we are now a model for children when we do this. So I think that's another important reason to bring out.
It absolutely is. Yes.
But it isn't easy to listen to somebody, particularly when they're saying stuff that you don't want to hear. And I think we're going to talk about that down the road, right?
Yes.
So
Definitely.
maybe you
That's
could
it.
tell us about what is in store for
Okay.
other series.
All right. As we're getting close to the end of our first session here, we will be looking next time, which will be next month, at how do you respond to someone's point of view in a relationship when it is very different from your own. So how do you respond to that without damaging the relationship? Another thing I want to point out here is that even though we're pointing out mistakes that can be made, and obviously when we see them demonstrated this way, they become pretty obvious. If you're sitting there and looking and say, oh my gosh, I do that, or I know who does that, we're not here to cast blame or to say that if this is occurring, or you do this occasionally in your relationship, that your relationship is doomed. We all make mistakes in these things. So our purpose here is to create more awareness so that you can catch it when it's happening and change it to a more productive skill. So that brings us to the end of our episode 1. And again, hopefully you'll look for us next month. So thank you for watching.